from where I sit as a recruiter, autonomous vehicles seem to be something that popped up more and more, certainly in Boston and San Francisco. But with COVID-19 in mind, then how has that disrupted the robotics market and that kind of upward curve that you mentioned we were kind of on?
Yeah, so I think if you look at the autonomous vehicle space, I mean, for one thing, that market has some major questions that it has to answer regardless of COVID-19. That has enormous investment with virtually no revenue and no actual dedicated business model. A lot of the people developing this technology are in effect open to whoever can make a business model out of the technology they're providing. Another issue that they're coming into, focus is the issue of improving their safety models. Now, the idea was that the safety models for navigation for autonomous vehicles on the road would match Moore's law, that it would just exponentially increase.
Right.
What's actually happened is that as the models have got more sophisticated, the edge cases have got harder to create and replicate, and it's become much more expensive to develop better data that you can then feed in to improve this model. So the actual cost of improving these systems has increased markedly, and already prior to COVID-19 there were casualties. COVID-19 basically suspended all testing of autonomous vehicles in California from the get-go, because the vast majority of these vehicles still require a driver in the vehicle. There's only two companies that are registered to deploy completely driverless vehicles in California, Nuro and Waymo, and they have continued testing, but most other companies have had to suspend it. And at the same time, some companies like Starsky have gone out of business. So the self-driving car space, I think, is in a state of real not peril, but flux, and there will be considerable casualties, because one thing that this likely recession will bring into focus is the profitability of these robotics companies, and too many, I'm afraid, have significant investment and have relied so extensively on VC and corporate subsidies without actually finding a road to profitability. Now, that's not just a problem with robotics. That's also a problem with Uber, with WeWork. There are so many Silicon Valley companies that are, frankly, very exposed to a recession. And they've largely been able to survive because of the sort of fair weather climate we've been in. I think this recession is going to probably create some second order effects in the tech industry, which will see a lot of players burn quite severely. Now, moving on to industrial robotics, there is going to be a massive shortfall in the first half of the year. China is obviously the largest manufacturer in the world, and it's got the largest single install base of robots. The two major industries for the industrial robotics market are the automotive manufacturing space and electronics, including smartphone devices. Now, in China, in Q1, I think the shortfall in automotive sales was about 80%. They're expecting about a 5% drop for the whole year. And when it comes to electronic devices, as much as half of the revenue could be lost due to COVID-19. Even when and if China gets back online, which they say they are when it comes to manufacturing capacity, they still have to deal with a much lower demand in the United States and in the developed world. So those two markets are really going to manufacture, and you will probably see a subsequent shortfall in industrial robotics sales, at least in the short term. In the long term, they probably have a much rosier future, because all this money has just been thrown into the economy, either through fiscal stimulus or just through sheer liquidity, to the point where capex and capital expenditures in capital equipment is very likely to increase in the long term. But yeah, there's no doubt that, at least to a large segment of the robotics industry, COVID-19 has been incredibly disruptive, for the first quarter. If you look at consumer robotics as well, I mean, their forecast for the growth pattern for this year has been totally thrown out the window. We're talking about the consumer vacuums. But, that's the short term. I think COVID-19 in the long term is going to be sort of counterintuitively quite beneficial to the robotics industry and to the automation of various practices in general.